As state and federal law enforcement desperately try to find a missing 10-year-old girl who hasn't been seen since June, her mother has now been arrested. But the charge is interesting, as well as what she allegedly has been up to. We are bringing in a private investigator and psychologist to try to get to the bottom of what may have happened to this child. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Obviously, this is a story we wanted to put a spotlight on. It's important to cover, okay? And the reason that we can do that is because of the amazing support that we get from our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. We're talking about America's largest personal injury law firm, a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. They have recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months alone, a client in Florida received $12 million when insurance offered just $350,000. Out in Pennsylvania, another client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's offer. Morgan & Morgan, they make it easy to fight for what you deserve. You can even start a claim from your phone. So if you're injured, you can start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. You can click the link below, or you can scan the QR code on screen. Big development we have for you in the case of a missing 10-year-old girl, a child who has been missing for 4 months. We can now announce her mother has been arrested. Now, it is interesting what she is currently being charged with and what that could mean. We are talking about Gabrielle Patricia Terrelong out of Margate, Florida. This innocent, sweet child was last seen June 21st out at a Walmart with her mom in Hollywood, Florida. But she was only recently reported missing. It wasn't until October 29th that she was reported missing, and I'm going to explain why. Now, the Margate Police Department posted on Facebook in part, quote, "The Margate Police Department is asking for the public's assistance in locating 10-year-old Gabrielle Terrelong. Gabrielle Terrelong is approximately 4 foot 8 inches tall and weighs approximately 90 pounds. Anyone who has seen Gabrielle Terrelong is urged to contact the Margate Police Department's Criminal Investigations Division at 954-972-7111. Now, WSVN reported also that she was last seen wearing a white t-shirt, black long pants, white Crocs, and this is somebody who authorities said would travel from place to place, more specifically traveling between Central and South Florida with family. And at the time, authorities indicated that she may be with her 34-year-old mother, Pasha Davis, who was apparently last seen at the time wearing all black clothing and possibly carrying a large black backpack, indicating also that they may have traveled to Orlando. Oh, and by the way, Miss Davis was in jail. Yeah, she was arrested on October 17th for allegedly shoplifting at a Dollar Tree store. This is when Gabrielle's father reported his daughter missing. He lives in Central Florida. So now you're understanding the timeline. Now here's the thing. Before she was arrested, which is the current update, which we're going to talk about, Davis actually made bond, was released from jail, and no one knew where she was. Gabrielle's aunt, who last saw her niece last year, told NBC6 that Davis is usually unhoused, that she suffers from mental health issues, that she was even Baker acted, that's involuntarily committed, and refused to stay with her, ended up disappearing with Gabrielle. There was even a missing child alert that was issued in Florida. The aunt saying, "I fear that someone has taken her or she's given her to someone that she doesn't know." Her mother does not trust Gabby with anyone, and so that is the most alarming, scary part of this whole situation. She's in jail for over 10 days, and we have no idea where Gabby would be. Well, now we got to talk about what's happening. Her mother, Miss Davis, the person we've been talking about, has been found, and she has been arrested on a charge of child neglect without great bodily harm. Okay? Her bond has been set at $100,000. She is ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation, to wear an ankle monitor. Her attorney reportedly didn't discuss where Gabrielle may be. And actually, listen to this back and forth between the judge and the assistant state attorney.
Am I to understand that allegedly she doesn't know where the child is?
Your Honor, what's understood is she hasn't said anything. It's not known if that's actually accurate.
But to be clear, the FBI Miami field office, which joined the search, Margate Police Department, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, they have confirmed that Gabrielle still has not been found, that she is at risk. So anybody with information on her whereabouts is urged to contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI, or you can submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov, or at the FDLE or the Margate Police Department, again, 954-972-7111, or call 911. Now, Gabrielle's aunt telling WSVN 7 News Miami, quote, "We don't have any clue where she is. I mean, it would have been better if they even didn't want to give her to me. They could have taken her and put her in foster care, but there was more than enough family members that were willing to take her, but nobody was willing to help to do the right thing. Her family loves her, and my worst fear is that Gabrielle is not alive." All right, I want to bring in Joni Johnston, clinical and forensic psychologist, licensed private investigator. I'm so happy to have you and get your perspective on this. What concerns you the most right now about Gabrielle's whereabouts?
I think what concerns me the most immediately, of course, is the mom is not cooperating with police, and she's been reluctant to say anything about where her daughter is. And I think when you take that and you put it in the context of what the relatives are saying, particularly the aunt, in terms of this is somebody who apparently has a history of untreated severe mental illness and substance use, who doesn't have a history of leaving her daughter with other people. The fact that the aunt has checked with people that they know and the daughter is not there. The fact that the aunt describes her the mom as deteriorating and getting worse over time. All these things I think are really scary in terms of, where do we go from here?
Could a mental health evaluation that's being ordered, right, in terms of the bond conditions, could a mental health evaluation, have you seen it ever provide answers from a defendant regarding what may have happened here?
I think that a mental health evaluation can be helpful in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, to see how severe this person's mental illness is currently, and probably has been over the past several months. We know, for example, that she was apparently what they call Baker acted at one point, which means she was held because she was believed to be a danger to herself or others. And that's oftentimes a difficult thing to do. So that means that at that point in time, this person was in some kind of crisis. So I think a mental health evaluation can help understand, for example, if she's suffering from delusions and what those delusions might be. Sometimes we see parents who are untreated, who have a severe mental illness and develop delusions, for example, around a child or a family member, and end up harming that child in the context of that delusion or that belief. So I think it can help us understand that. It can also help us understand how disorganized or organized she was in her thinking or her functioning. If this is somebody who was disorganized, particularly if she was also using drugs or alcohol, she may very well not remember what happened to her daughter. So I think those are the kind of things that those questions can answer, much more than directly, what happened to your daughter.
And I appreciate that. That's a good explanation about some of the difficulties that may be found if she's interviewed. Let me ask you, generally speaking, we don't know exactly what happened here, right? She's innocent until proven guilty. She hasn't directly been implicated. Well, she has been charged, and we'll talk about what that charge can mean. But what would be some of the questions that you would ask? What would be some of the ways that you can elicit information from somebody, from a family member who is potentially suspected of doing something to their child? What are ways you get them to open up?
I think one of the things that would be helpful is, first of all, figuring out what is she saying? What is her frame of reference currently? She must be giving, if I'm talking to this person, I want to figure out what their explanation is. Is she not saying anything at all? Is she saying she doesn't remember? What is she saying as an explanation, starting with her there? And I would also, I think, want to kind of take her back and try to do some kind of timeline with her in terms of when was the last time that she remembers being with her daughter, and taking her through that. Also, what has her life been like over the past, 3 or 4 months? Why does she think that maybe her daughter is with her husband, which is what she apparently has said, or with the child's father, not her husband, with the child's father. So trying to get a sense where she is, and starting from there and working our way back. I think is going to be the most helpful thing with her, because if we don't start with where she is, she's likely going to shut down and not say anything.
Does it surprise you at all that no one has found this little girl yet?
It certainly concerns me. If she has in fact been missing for 4 months, I think that is really concerning in terms of she could be anywhere. She could have gone off with somebody else. Somebody could have picked her up. So I think that part of it makes it much more complicated and much more understandable in a way that we don't know where she is. Also, the fact that they were transient, they moved around quite a bit, I think makes it also very complicated. So I think those things make it more understandable. And it's frightening to think that you can have a child who just disappears. And not only do we not know where she is, but nobody seemed to notice that except for, a few immediate family members for so long.
And that, I was going to ask you, the age, 10 years old, does that present a challenge when you're talking about a missing person?
I think it's a challenge when you're talking about any missing child. I think that, she's old enough certainly to be verbal and be able to say what her name is and, where she's from, who she's been living with and those kinds of things. So I think, to that extent, it's better that she's 10 than she's 3 or 4. So she can certainly communicate. But she's still very young and she's vulnerable, and even though her aunt says that she's kind of street savvy, she's somebody who's used to not trusting adults. Her mom has kind of taught her to be suspicious of other people. She's used to kind of navigating the streets. At the end of the day, she's a 10-year-old child and she thinks like a 10-year-old child. And that might mean that she can be easily tricked to go with somebody. It might mean that she believes stories that you or I wouldn't believe. So she's vulnerable, certainly, to that extent.
When she's now been arrested and charged with child neglect without great bodily harm, it's a very interesting charge to arrest her on. Obviously, the first thing that I thought is that a way to detain her? Is that a way to maybe get more information? It's a placeholder charge, maybe. I hope it's not, placeholder charge if we're thinking something worse has happened to this little girl. But to charge her with that, what did you make of that?
I would agree with you. I mean, I'm not an attorney, certainly, but I would think that would be a way of, keeping her in custody and also hoping that she's going to cooperate at some point, hoping that she's going to, be willing to sit down with them and talk about what's happened to her daughter, as opposed to them throwing the book at her now. And running the risk of her shutting down completely. And she's the only person who can provide likely any insight into what happened to her daughter.
How difficult will it be to track her movements? If you're talking about somebody who was at the Walmart, who was arrested, who was in jail, who disappeared, you look at that timeline from the last 4 months, how difficult is it to track her movements, her actions?
Well, I think on the one hand, we have surveillance cameras everywhere, and that's always a benefit to us. So when she's going into stores and those kinds of things, it sounds like that Gabby's aunt has made a lot of effort on numerous occasions to find her. So she knows, it sounds like, at least some of the places that Gabby was going and where she was staying and those kind of things. So I think that there's some optimism in terms of, knowing kind of the region or the area where she would kind of travel back and forth from, and the fact that there are more surveillance cameras. But 4 months is a lot of time to try to go back and piece together. And so I don't think that's going to happen quickly.
And if they don't have evidence, and I hate to get macabre here, but I have to ask, if they don't get evidence that there was a disposal of some way, there was no evidence of a killing or no evidence of a disposal, is the next natural conclusion that this little girl, like we talked about before and mentioned before, that she was that she was handed off to someone else or is in the custody, I don't care, of someone else?
I think those are probably the two most likely scenarios at this point, that either something tragic has happened to this child with the mom, and that has yet to be discovered, or that somehow this child has been either given or taken by somebody else, which is, both of those are very frightening scenarios. But I do think that would be the probably second most likely thing to have happened.
I think it's a big deal that they issued a missing child alert, that was activated. And just to give everybody an understanding of this, according to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, that is when the 4 following criteria are met. So you have a child who's under the age of 18. Law enforcement has a well-founded belief based on an active investigation that the child is in danger of death or serious bodily injury. There is a detailed description or photograph of the child to broadcast to the public, and the local law enforcement agency of jurisdiction recommends activation. Thoughts on that being activated and how much that is a resource that can be used here?
I certainly think it's time for it to be activated, for sure. They've explored every avenue, it sounds like, in terms of trying to get the mother to talk and provide some information about where her daughter is, and that has failed, at least to date. And so I think second to that, knowing that she's been living on the streets, that she's been with her mom, that she hasn't been seen in 4 months, those criteria are certainly met. And I think that's, the best avenue for trying to locate this child at this point, as long as the mom isn't talking. So I think that's a very important resource. And I'm sure they're doing more than just, releasing this information. I'm sure they're looking at what they know about sex trafficking in Florida. I'm sure they're exploring all those resources as well, talking to people that would have access to that.
How much can the public help here? In your experience, how much does the public help in these active missing persons cases or missing children's cases?
I mean, I think it's incredible, the number of tips that have panned out for law enforcement. And I think one of the benefits of the fact that more people are interested in crime and understanding what happens when people go missing and people get hurt and there are victims and there are perpetrators is I think people are much more eager and willing to put effort into finding a child. So I think, there's never been a time like now where it's most likely to be helpful to law enforcement, because I think people have their ears and their eyes open and they'll be looking for her.
You hope so. And you hope that the more it's published, the more it's publicized. One of the reasons we wanted to cover it and provide information to people out there, if they have if they can contact law enforcement, more eyeballs on something, the better. And particularly in missing persons cases, time is of the essence. FBI is now involved in this too. How does that affect things? What kind of resources do they bring?
I mean, I think they just really elevate the resources that are available and their reach. So I think, one of the benefits with the FBI, of course, is they're going to be looking at multiple states. They're going to be doing some coordination with different law enforcements. And so I think they can really, in some respects, broaden the search and intensify it. And I think at this point, certainly every resource is available needs to be utilized to help try to find this little girl.
Now, if Miss Davis did hurt her daughter or harm her daughter in some way, okay? In your experience, in your practice, in your profession, what could cause a mother to harm her own child if that is what happened here? Again, she hasn't been directly implicated in the worst that we can imagine. But if we are thinking of different scenarios here, what could cause or motivate a mother to harm her child?
Well, I think there are several scenarios when we look at parents who harm their children. One is there is oftentimes, and again, this is not related to this case that we know of at this point, but sometimes you have obviously a history of abuse, right? A history of physical abuse. That kind of quote goes too far. So it's not a planned murder, but it happens. And so there's a history and a pattern of abuse. Other people have often noticed injuries on the child, those kinds of things. So that's one scenario that can happen. Number two can be the much rarer scenario of when you have a parent who plans to murder a child for the child is an inconvenience to them in some respects. They don't want to pay child support. There's all kinds of reasons that a parent might murder a child. And then in also relatively rare situations, you have severely mentally ill individuals who are, delusional. They're hearing voices telling them they need to make a sacrifice, for example, and the child, they're going to be like Abraham. I saw a couple of cases like that where the person was hearing voices and, Abraham was called to show his love to God by sacrificing his child, to develop this kind of delusion. And the child was in serious danger. Fortunately, no harm came to this child. But that's another scenario is when it's not just the person has a mental illness, it's an untreated mental illness and the delusions directly involve that child. So I think those are some of the scenarios that come to mind in terms of, situations where parents do end up murdering a child.
Scary to think about. Before we wrap up, I want to put up the contact information one more time. So you can contact the FBI if you have information at 1-800-CALL-FBI. You can also submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov. You can contact the Florida Department of Law Enforcement or the Margate Police Department at 954-972-7111, or obviously you can call 911. Joni Johnston, thank you so much for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.